Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 28th episode, our target is 2012's Frankenweenie, produced by Walt Disney Studios and Tim Burton Productions, and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. In December of 2007, Tim Burton was asked to direct two films for Disney, those being the 2010 live-action adaptation of Alice in Wonderland and this film. However, production on the film dates back to November of 2005, when scripts were being written by Josanne McGibson and Sarah Perriott. In January of 2009, though first being approached in 2006, John August was hired to do a rewrite. The film was shot in black and white, just like the original short film from 1984, also directed by Tim Burton. Many animation artists and crew from the 2005 film Corpse Bride were involved in this film. To promote the film, Sparky's tombstone was added to the pet cemetery outside the Haunted Mansion Holiday at Disneyland. The film was initially set to release in November of 2011, but changed to March 9th of 2012, and then changed again to October 5th, 2012, when it would finally release. The film made $81.5 million on a budget of $39 million and received mostly positive reviews. The film was nominated for 31 awards, of which it won 8 of. It was directed by Tim Burton, and the screenplay was by John August. It was based on the 1984 short film Frankenweenie by Tim Burton and Lenny Rips. The producers were Tim Burton and Allison Abate, and the cinematographer was Peter Sorg. The music was by Danny Elfman, and the editing was by Chris Lebenson and Mark Solomon. The cast includes Charlie Tahan, Catherine O'Hara, Martin Short, Martin Landau, Atticus Shaffer, Winona Ryder, Robert Capron, James Hiroyuki Liao, Conchata Farrell, and Tom Kenny. The film starts with a boy named Victor Frankenstein who enjoys working alone and making homemade movies. His one friend that he is willing to work with is his dog, Sparky. Living in the town of New Holland, his next-door neighbor, Mr. Burgermeister, is the mayor as well as the uncle of his niece, Elsa. When his science teacher is struck by lightning, not an uncommon appearance given that the town has thunderstorms every night, he is replaced by Mr. Rizukuski, who tells them about the upcoming science fair. After school, Victor is approached by a strange student, along with a cat named Mr. Whiskers, who warns him that something either very great or very bad is going to happen to him because Mr. Whiskers dreamed about him the previous night. Victor is similarly approached by Edgar, who wants to work with him on the science fair, given Victor's intelligence, but Victor declines, preferring to work alone. That night, Victor asks his parents to sign the permission slip for the science fair, with his dad agreeing to if he participates in baseball, in an attempt to have Victor make friends. At the baseball game, Victor almost gets struck out, but makes a home run, with Sparky chasing after it into the street, only to be hit by an oncoming car, killing him. Heartbroken, Victor is inspired by his new science teacher with an idea to revive Sparky. That night, Victor gathers the supplies, including the corpse of Sparky, and strikes him with lightning, reviving him in a Frankenstein-like state, but alive nonetheless. Leaving him in the attic, Victor goes to school, but Edgar finds out about Sparky and convinces Victor to let him try it out on a dead goldfish that turns invisible for some reason, and eventually disappears altogether. Edgar then blabs to his classmates about Victor's invention, who all discover exactly how Victor did it and try it for themselves, wanting to have the winning science fair project. The animals they revive all turn into monsters because their invention lacked emotional intention, like Victor and Sparky, and rather out of a desire to win. Victor and Sparky then stop all the monsters who have disrupted the town's festival. The final monster results in a battle in a burning windmill, in which Sparky is taken down with the monster. The town, seeing Sparky as a hero, helps Victor revive him again. Firstly, I wanted to start with the main thing that bugged me throughout the movie, and afterwards thinking about the film. That is the fact that the movie, in a lot of its aspects, feels unfinished, or at the very least lacking a conclusion. I want to start off by saying that I do think this is a good movie, and I do enjoy a lot of its elements, but the fact that so many of these elements lack conclusions is a somewhat significant drawback, as it makes most of these elements feel like they're missing something. I'll get into more specifics in the following sections, but I wanted to group some of them together here in order to highlight that fact more. Take for instance Victor's classmates. Now, I really like the classmate characters. I think they're really fun and mostly make good use with their limited screen time. However, many of them feel like they're set up for something that never gets paid off. Toshiaki, for example, is very motivated to win the science fair and does not stop to consider the consequences of his actions or the safety of others, so long as he wins. This ends in him reviving a turtle using Victor's process and accidentally creating a giant monster. Even then, however, he still attempts to film the beast and win. It isn't until the monster is defeated that he seems remorseful for his actions, but then that's it. There isn't any scene of him afterwards. It's also unclear what his connection to the dead turtle is, whether it is just a random animal that he picked, or if it was his pet previously. He definitely seemed to have a connection to it, but it is never outright said or explained. The science teacher, whose name I cannot pronounce, is another good example. The teacher, after being blamed for the child who fell off the roof trying to come up with a science fair project, is fired, but first is able to clue Victor as to why his experiment didn't work the second time around. He seemed like a really interesting character, but once again, that's the last we ever see of him. Before he is fired, he also is asked to speak in his defense, but does so in a very demeaning manner that feels like it really could have used more explaining. I'll get into more examples as we go on, it's really quite unavoidable, but I just wanted to draw specific attention to it real quick. Next, let's talk about the protagonists, Victor and his dog Sparky. Victor is a pretty fun protagonist with a very empathetic story about how he can't make friends with anyone outside of his dog, and how he doesn't really want to. When his parents make a deal with him to allow him to enter the science fair in return for him playing baseball, it results in the death of Sparky, leaving Victor pretty devastated and without friends. After being inspired by a science lesson, he is able to revive his dog, and at this point the story kinda stops being about Victor, and more so about the various adventures with Sparky. These parts are fun, but I don't really have a whole lot to talk about them. I think it's also worth noting the fun setup to Sparky's revival, with it being mentioned that the town has lightning storms every night, which obviously helps Victor and later his classmates in reviving animals. But at the moment it just seems like it's an explanation for the previous science teacher's disappearance. From here it is made clear that while Victor is smallly impacted by the lack of endings, it is possibly the most obvious when analyzing the film, as there is really two ways it could be interpreted. The first is a story about grief after losing his dog, but the message there kind of falls flat when the whole premise revolves around the dog being revived. And while Sparky does die again in the finale, he is ultimately brought back again. Not to say that I think Sparky should have stayed dead the second time, not without some major setup being added anyways, but it does kind of erase the message of dealing with grief and ending in acceptance, you know? The second story is the one I think they should have gone with, and that is Victor being unable to make friends outside of Sparky. This would have been an easy fix too. Just have his classmates help him in taking down the monsters, instead of just Victor and Sparky, because as is, it is a cool scene, but still lacks any deeper emotional message. I think that an ending that found a nice balance between Victor working alone and learning to cooperate with others would have been very nice. Instead, however, Victor would likely be even further removed from his classmates, given that they stole his invention, used it for selfish purposes, and then did nothing to help defeat them. As is, Victor and Sparky are still good protagonists with fun scenes and a fun story, but I still think the ending could have been a bit nicer. Also, the scene where Sparky dies the first time deserves credit for still being emotionally devastating, despite the fact that the whole premise of the movie is that the dog gets revived again. Next, let's discuss Victor's classmates in the film, who vary on a wide range of quality. First off, there's Edgar, who initially seemed to me like he was going to end up being Victor's friend, but instead went off in a different direction of being much more mischievous, which was actually kind of fun to watch. I like how he wants to be Victor's science fair project and ends up getting rejected, but how he didn't immediately approach the subject again after Sparky's death, which I really thought he was going to, instead showing that he has a caring side too. Similarly, I like how he is hesitant to rat out Victor as the initial person who was able to revive animals, but his desire to show off his project got the best of him. I still think it would have been nice if he ended up as Victor's friend, but he's still a perfectly fun side character, who is able to stand out from his classmates, who are similarly cunning and odd. There's also Weird Girl, which is apparently her actual name according to the credits of the movie, who is pretty funny, with her huge eyes and small pupils. I think her cat is also funny, with him apparently having dreams about people, and then either something good or bad happens to them. She is another victim of the lack of endings, however, with her cat accidentally fusing with the bat she revives and becoming a monster. This monster is then killed when the windmill is set on fire, and that's how it ends. I'm pretty sure her cat just got straight up killed. But her last scene was before that, so I guess it doesn't matter, which is weird. Then there's Toshiaki, who we have already discussed somewhat negatively, but he's a fun character overall still. From there, the characters are pretty minor. Bob is Toshiaki's science fair partner, and the kid who falls off the roof and breaks his arm when Toshiaki tells him to test out their soda bottled powered jetpack. It would have been fun to see that sort of thing transpire more. Then there's Nazor, who seemingly appears out of nowhere with no real introduction. Doesn't really do that much that Toshiaki didn't already. Finally, there's Elsa, Victor's next-door neighbor, who really feels like there was something more planned, but plays a very minimal role. If anything, her dog is more important to the story, with her forming a bond with Sparky. Overall, these characters range from good to just underused. I give Frankenweenie an 8 out of 10 for being a short and somewhat unfinished, yet still fun and enjoyable Halloween movie. This will probably turn out to be one of my shorter episodes, but given that the film itself is only 82 minutes in total, I think it makes sense. The film is definitely strange and a lot of things are left unexplained, but it nonetheless manages to sustain for its charm. I do have some issues with it, but ultimately I still find it really fun and definitely worth the watch. Welp, that's all folks. I hope you enjoyed and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.